Hey, friendship is a virtue of our faith. Jesus made friends all the time, right? My name is Jason Dooley. I serve as one of the pastors at Galilee United Methodist Church. We're a church really in 3 locations now. So Galilee's main campus is in Sterling, right where 7 and 28 tee off on the intersection of Sterling and Ashburn. So we've got a lot of people in both those communities. Our second campus is at a gated community in Leesburg called Lansdowne Woods, so the chapel congregation there. And third, now we have virtually launched a church online presence. That's where we live mainly right now because we're not doing any in-person worship. So let me tell you a little bit about what we have done at our church during these pandemic months to stay connected with our congregation. First, I want to say that Galilee is a church that has some blessings and benefits of not only online ministry, which we've done for years, live streaming prior to the pandemic, but we also have the blessing of a paid staff work area for communications. We've maintained a fairly strong and consistent presence through social media for years. And we've also been using a digital newsletter, the weekly e-news that our staff puts out with regular articles from people on staff or people in the congregation who serve in volunteer areas, and occasional videos from pastors at our church as well. So Galilee has a lot of that in place already, and we feel blessed by that. I know not every church has that, but I think that in these few minutes that I have with you, hopefully some ideas will come across that anybody, any church of any size could find helpful. So what we did in the first few months of the pandemic was we utilized staff and then some key volunteers, Stephen ministers. We utilized some chairpersons, people who were involved in new people. And we divided up our membership, pretty much the active membership role, and empowered all of these, like 24 staff and volunteers, to take a couple of dozen people on the roll to be sort of like their flock, and they would shepherd them by reaching out to them, having phone calls if that worked, or at least an email contact, so that our goal was within the first months of the pandemic, every active member on our rolls would receive some sort of personal touch from somebody within the congregation. So we prepared by equipping the staff and volunteers with certain responses, how to craft that email. It wasn't a script, but we tried to encourage certain things and to give them information to respond to any frequently asked questions they may have, and ways that people could connect to community services if they had needs beyond what our church could provide. But basically, we were asking them, and this is where the fruit of the labor really came to be, we asked them especially how we might be in prayer for them. And so then when we were allowed to share that, we could share that, and people were prayed for. Relationships were built up, friendships were made through that. And again, people felt connected to their church and to others in the church who cared about them, especially during those very stressful first few months of the pandemic. So I found that very helpful. Now, finally, I'll say this from my experience as pastor, I imagine many of my colleagues are doing something similar or who did this very much what I'm doing, but I found it a personal blessing in my ministry. I set myself to the task of trying to call as many of my core congregants as possible. Now, Galilee has, between Galilee and Chapel, probably 450 households identified on our actual membership roll. A certain number of those are very loosely connected to the church. So I took like the core, about 200 committed, fairly active households in the church. And I set myself to the task of trying to contact about 12 people every week myself. And this is where the blessing has been. I have one of my assistants send out an email ahead of time saying, hey, Pastor Jason would like to have a 15-minute phone call with you in the next week or so. Here are the windows of availability. Let us know what works for you if you would like that. And depending on what people wanted, I would either meet with them face to face if that was safely doable, or have a phone call with them, or if it was just an email exchange even, at least I had a touch point with people in my church. And I continue to do this, probably averaging about a dozen a week. And for me, here's the blessing. I have gotten to know people in my church even better than I knew them before the pandemic, because I might shake hands on a Sunday morning back when we could do that, right? And just have 30 seconds with them. If I get these phone calls, sometimes I have 15, sometimes I have 30 minutes with a family, they're on speakerphone or however it works. And I get to talk with them and learn about them. And I feel like it really deepens our connection. It strengthens our relationship with one another. And I'm just really enjoying it. So, one of the tricks is you kind of have to figure out what really works for each individual. Some people like phone calls, some people don't. Some people, you can only get them to respond by a certain touch on one of the social media platforms. And that's not my favorite, but we'll do that, whatever works for those people. And I mentioned this strategy to our bishop, and she said to me, yes, Jason, keep doing that. The sheep want to hear the voice of their shepherd. I say that because I want you, if there's a pastor listening to this, I want you to be encouraged like I was, that people want to hear from you. And my experience in the pandemic is, at least for a good core of my congregation, they actually want to talk with me. They want to be connected to the church, maybe some more now than ever. And so it's a special work. The church is all about relationships. Jesus was consistently with people. So whatever works for you, I encourage you to keep on reaching out and connect with your people.